Welcome to Evening Rounds, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes in medicine. Tonight, we talk with Dr. April Wilson, a preventative medicine expert who cuts through confusing health information to provide practical lifestyle advice. If you like what you hear tonight, please subscribe. April, it's great to have you on our Evening Rounds podcast.
Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here.
We've done a lot of work through the years together, and I've always appreciated your insights and thoughts when sometimes things aren't as clear from an evidence-based perspective and we have to make decisions. And we'll chat about some of that tonight. I've asked you about bioidentical hormones, weight loss drugs, all sorts of things through the years. You know, it's interesting. You don't have an accent, but you're from Liverpool.
I am. Liverpool, Pennsylvania.
Oh, Pennsylvania.
Named after Liverpool, England.
So cool.
So how does a child growing up in Liverpool, Pennsylvania, end up in Southern California?
That's a great question. And you know, the honest answer is I really didn't want to, but I'm so glad that I did. And I went to college on the East Coast. My whole family was there. And I was in a relationship with someone out in that area. And I thought I should go to med school here. And then through the course of things that happened, I ended up here instead. And I really felt like God was leading me here, but I was a little resistant, like, okay, fine. And then when I first day on the campus, I landed, I came in, I was standing, I remember in the center of campus, and I was just like, this just feels right. Like, I'm meant to be here. And I had this real sense of peace about it. And that other relationship ended up coming to a close. I met my husband, and the rest, as we say, is history 3 kids later.
So cool. And he went to medical school with you.
Yes, we met in the beginning of our first year of med school. We both kind of disagree about when that exact moment was, but literally studied anatomy and physiology together very early in our med school career. And my husband's joke is, I asked my wife to meet me in the anatomy lab, and she said, over my dead body.
We needed that. This podcast needed that joke.
Ching. That's great. So you always knew you were going to be a doctor? How did you decide, like what, as a child growing up, were you attracted to medicine? Did you have mentors? Were your parents physicians? How did you get to Loma Linda Medical School?
The earliest I can think of, it was very early. I don't know exactly when, but probably by age 7 or 8. And then the best I can connect it with is my grandfather had wanted to become a physician. He got drafted during World War II, was not able to become a physician. He made some choices where he got married and had kids by the time he was out of the military and things. And so it just wasn't practical for him. He felt like, I just need to get a job. But he always had an interest. So he was always kind of facilitating this very kind of fascinating questioning about medical things. He worked in a lab for a while. He had this microscope, and he had, I don't even know what slides they were, but there were these old slides of different like blood cells and things. He'd be like, let's look at these together. And just very empowering and encouraging me, like, you can do whatever you want to do. And even though I came from a non-medical, most people were not college educated in my family. He really just empowered, like, you can, whatever it is, you can do it. And so I think that seed was planted, and I started thinking about it, and I just guess I never let go. I kept going with it. And I think that was really where it started for me.
What was that like when you graduated med school to him?
Oh, well, I think it was meaningful, definitely for him. And it's hard to say what happens in someone else's mind, but I will say for me, the most meaningful part for me was when you graduate medical school, there's this specific process that happens where someone puts your hood, which is kind of the recognition of your specific degree pathway, over you and recognizes that you are graduating as a physician. And he was still in good enough health and things that he was able to fly out to Loma Linda from Pennsylvania and be the person to hood me. And that was a really, just a really special moment for me.
Yeah, that's super cool. My grandfather was able to do the same thing for me. Also a World War II vet. I should have you describe a bit more about what kind of physician you are. And what kind of clinics do you run, and the specialties and the disorders that you often see.
Sure. So my background, my official board training is preventive medicine, public health. And I have additional certifications in lifestyle medicine as an intensivist and in obesity medicine as a diplomat of that board. So I have those 3 areas. And in my day-to-day practice, the patients I tend to see are those who have some type of chronic disease, which means, most Americans are a candidate to be a patient in my practice, potentially, because we all struggle with something, right? Especially as we're aging, getting over that 40-year mark, there's usually something that we have that we can work on. And so it's often people who are struggling with their weight, occasionally patients who are struggling with alcohol or tobacco addictions. I'm not an addictionologist, so if it's really intense in that area, then I let my other colleagues deal with that. But if it's something that can help to foster their current journey in lifestyle change, then that's something that I try to help them with as well.
I feel like we here at Loma Linda we really feel a lot of ownership of the lifestyle medicine practice. And you've really been such a big figure in kind of the new advances in that. Tell us a little bit about your role doing some of those things.
Sure. I think that when I think about lifestyle medicine, for me, the journey really began my very last year of medical school, close to the end of the year. And I was able to participate in a group that was taking place on our campus that involved some intensive lifestyle change with some patients. And I remember very distinctly, I had a patient who came in who was from a very disadvantaged local community background, very low socioeconomic status. And this patient was diabetic, and their basal insulin dose, if I recall, was somewhere in the 70s, 80s.
That's a ton.
Yeah, it's a lot. Wow. It's a lot. And so they made some changes. And by the end of the first week, 10 days, they had cut their dose of insulin in half.
What kind of
still
changes?
Having really good control. So they were eating a lot more beans. They were reducing processed foods and animal products, and it made a huge difference. So beans are so powerful and underappreciated. They're not the most fascinating food out there in a lot of ways, but they are so good for us. And so they really can make a huge difference.
I always talk
patients.
about the lentils are the gift of longevity in life. And in April, I think it'd be useful to talk to us a bit about why that is, because a lot of it has to do with the absorption, the speed of absorption, the rapid rise of insulin in response to the glucose challenge. But I think why not animal products, why not processed food, and why beans or legumes in this patient had that sort of impact?
Right. So the common pathway to almost all disease process is inflammation. So we're just looking, if you want to dial it down and make it very simple, what is the best way to reduce inflammation from a nutrition perspective? So there's a lot of different other things that we could pay attention to, but nutrition is one of the most powerful ones that we can utilize if a person wants to have lifestyle change. And so I'm looking for what I tell patients is clean sources of food. And so beans are great because they are a good source of protein. They have what we call a resistant starch. So even though we think of them as a carb, they are actually a carb that gets absorbed fairly slowly and helps to normalize blood sugars, normalize lipids, things like that. So that can be really beneficial from the perspective of beans. Nuts are the same. Patients often think of nuts as being very high in fat. They are, but they're actually one of the most powerful ways to help normalize blood sugars and things like that. So when I talk with my patients, I'm looking at how can we reduce the things that are not doing you any favors, the things that are going to be harmful. Animal products as a whole, for a variety of reasons, have highly inflammatory properties. And so, I try not to be dichotomous with my patients. It's not all or none unless that's helpful to them. Some people find it helpful to have really clear guardrails on both sides. And for them, that's fine. But I often talk to them. I'm like, ideally, you would have as little as possible. But if you love steak and you want to have steak on your birthday, I'm not here to sit here and say, never have a bite of steak again. But your health would be so much improved if we could have more of these clean sources of protein that don't come with TMAO and saturated fat and cholesterol and proteins that are more inflammatory and all these other things. And so a lot of patients, when they make the switch, come in and say, I'm sleeping better. I have less pain in my joints. A lot of things tend to improve. So I think there's a lot of benefits, but also recognize that it's a hard thing. And nutrition is a very it is a very divisive topic, and people have
really
very strong opinions. So I try to meet everybody wherever they're at.
Politics, nutrition, right?
It really is.
I always like to challenge patients to show me how high fructose corn, no one can because no one studied the Krebs cycle, but how does high fructose corn syrup get metabolized in the Krebs cycle? It doesn't. And it's a synthetic food that's in everything that doesn't expire, right? Things need to go moldy on the palate. So your point, clean, means that actually it will go through the bio deformation process and actually will grow mold at the end, right? Because there's not that synthetic protection on the food. So, and I'm not here to talk, negatively about American farmers and corn utilization, but high fructose corn syrup is evil. Yeah. Fundamentally evil. And it's a Western novelty that is now everywhere. And so that's fascinating. And I think being able to do what you just did and break it down in very simplistic ways is super helpful when there's so much information available to folks where it's this information overload, and at the end you're just like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm going to do.
I'm just going to keep eating the donut because that's what feels good. Yeah,
exactly. Media, food industry wants to perpetuate that. They want to keep us confused so that we just keep being like, I don't know what to do. I'll keep coming back and buying my chips.
Yeah.
So I'd be remiss, since you brought up weight loss, obesity, diabetes, which is pervasive in our society. There's a whole new class of drugs, GLP-1 agonist drugs, where the body gets high levels of what is naturally produced in the body, GLP-1. And I'm sure in your clinic, these are frequent conversation topics. I would like to understand how you view these drugs in the world of obesity, weight loss, diabetic management, and how you incorporate them into your armamentarium, if you will, because
good word.
Thank you. Armament. That's like a lot. That's like my high syllable word for the day. But part of the issue in my mind is if you don't change or modify your approach to food, then what you're basically saying is, I'm going to take this drug for the rest of my life. And maybe that's the right thing. Maybe it's not. I don't know. So I'm asking you these questions as the expert.
So I love this question, and I'm going to try to give you all the high points that I normally give to patients over the course of a visit.
Free of charge. I love this.
Free of charge. Yes. So the question would be, GLP-1s, are they good or are they not? That would be a question that a lot of patients would start with. And one of the ways that I explain this is, if you had a patient who's, let's say, always been overweight, and I'm just going to pick a random number, they've always been 300 pounds, and now they've lost weight and they weigh 200 pounds. And you compare that to a similarly sized, history person who's always weighed 200 pounds. The person who formerly weighed more, their level of expression of GLP-1 type actual normal hormones in the body that your body is making is going to be lower. So you are making less, and this is a satiety hormone. It gives messages from your gut to your brain.
What's satiety mean?
So satiety means that you feel satisfied when a meal is done. So you feel like, I don't need any more food. So when that person has lost weight, their brain is going to be producing signals at a higher level saying, I'm not full, I'm still hungry, compared to the person who's always had the lower weight. So it's not really, after weight loss, in terms of weight maintenance, a level playing field. Now, some people push through that. They have a lot of willpower. They have a lot of support. They put a lot of environmental and nutrition and exercise factors in place, and they are successful.
So this is fascinating. This is why patients can lose the weight, but it's very hard to keep the weight off.
This is one of the reasons. Yes. This is one of the ones that we probably understand better than a lot of others. But we know that there's numerous mechanisms that encourage our body to maintain a weight level that we have had in the past.
But if I've always eaten really poorly and I go on this drug and obviously I eat less, I lose the weight. But you're saying that then I'm just going to go right back to eating poorly if I've never had proper nutrition education.
Well, you may still continue to eat healthy. I will not judge you on whether you will eat healthy or unhealthy after you've lost the weight, but your brain will be saying, I need more food.
I see. Okay.
I need more food. I'm not satisfied. And then, so I think, as I think about GLP-1s, one of the things that they have done is to create the opportunity to level the playing field for a patient. So the patient has now done all these great things to lose weight, or they've used the GLP-1 to lose weight and successfully. And now they're like, okay, I'm ready to maintain weight. We're making it a little bit less hard for them to maintain that weight loss over time. Bariatric surgery does something very similar. It also alters some of these hormone levels, in particular GLP-1, and that's why people are less hungry after a bariatric surgery, in addition to the mechanical and actual physical changes in terms of the size of the stomach and some of those factors, how the food flows through the gastrointestinal tract. So when I talk to patients, what I tell them is, no matter what changes you make to lose weight, it's important to have a strong foundation. And that foundation, as much as you are able, should be based on having more movement, having less stress, having more quality nutrition, healthy relationships, attending to some of these risky substances or behaviors. Because for some patients, it's not a substance. It's not alcohol. It's not tobacco. It might be gambling. It might be pornography. There's just so many different things that are out there that social media screen time, right? Like that's a much more socially acceptable form of addiction or risky use of things that we use to escape. So, are you having things that you are escaping from the stress of your life? And how can we manage that? Because often food is one of the ways that we make ourselves feel better. The way food is currently packaged by the food industry is almost always a combination of salty, sweet, and fat. And that combination is such a powerful message to our brain, to our dopamine centers, to say, you feel great, you want more of this food, this is amazing for you, you should have more. But really, at the end of the day, the really healthy foods don't have those same combinations in the same percentages that give us such a strong hit of dopamine, which actually makes sense. That's why when we eat healthier, we don't have the drive to overeat. But on the other hand, you're not getting that same brain chemistry.
Excitement.
So I talk to patients about that. I'm like, this is healthy. And it can be very satisfying when you have so much fiber in your diet with the beans and the nuts and things. But I'm warning you, it's not the same as eating a chocolate chip cookie. You're not going to have that same feeling in your brain that you will have otherwise. And that's something we have to work through and adapt and adjust to, because that's not what exists in the healthier foods.
So we here at Loma Linda are very strategic about our social media presence, and we really work hard with a lot of our physicians to really educate and really try to have some, substantial information that's research-based, that, is legitimate, because we found that there is just so many awful, frankly, trends. There are so many influencers who have no medical degree, who have no science degree, who really have no basis for making a lot of the claims they're making, and encouraging people to do things that may be potentially harmful, or that may be, in direct conflict with maybe what they're hearing from their doctor. And so I'd love to hear kind of what you experience and how you really cut through all of that noise, because there is, especially for, I found, women and young girls, so many different influences that are so incredibly negative, I think, when it comes to proper nutrition and really ensuring that body type and body shape and all these different factors, that go into our brain and really stick there are protected. So can you tell us a little bit about what you would recommend for that?
Sure. One of the first things I tell my patients in a lot of visits is this is a no shame space. So I want you to feel like you can come here when things are going well. I want you to feel like you can come back when things are not going well. When you have a struggle, this is not about a moral issue or a moral failing. It's not about willpower. That we are in the situation we are in with whatever our current health is for a variety of things, but a few of them are the environment that we grew up in, our own genes and biology, the current systems that we've put in place. And so I really try to frame it for the patients as this is just an opportunity to problem solve, to test and trial some things, and to see what works well. And then I try to share a little bit from my own experience. For example, I got this under desk elliptical, and I thought this would be such a great idea. And I literally never used it, like maybe once or twice. But it would be easy to give up and be like, I will never crack this particular challenge. I will never figure this out. I'm just going to give up, right? Because this didn't work for me. And I think a lot of us, and we feel ashamed, right? We feel like this is embarrassing. I bought this, I spent money on it, and now I'm getting rid of it. But I mean, this is what our patients live with every day, right? I bought exercise bands and I thought I would use them, or I bought this healthy food and I thought I would eat it, but it went bad in my refrigerator. Like that happens to me too. I struggle just like you do. And so just encouraging them to be persistent. Eventually I tried an exercise bike, which I still have, that has a little desk on top. And I use that sometimes, but then I wasn't using it enough. Better than the elliptical, but not as good as what I wanted. So then I got the walking pad. And I found for me, that was a better tool. And I'm not saying we have to go out and buy a bunch of expensive equipment. It's just the principle of the matter that it's about solving a problem. I needed a way to be more active during the workday. And so I just kept looking for, what are ways to do that? For a while, I was setting an alarm on my phone every 20 to 30 minutes so that I wouldn't sit for so long. And then I would get up and walk for a minute or two. That one just didn't work quite as well for me. So it's just this persistence. And I'm on this journey. It doesn't have to be instantaneous. And how can I shape all the forces in my life to make it easier to make the healthier choices that I want to make?
Yeah. So it's maybe not listening as much to some of those exterior voices, or even the voices that we're feeding.
Yes. And we know, there's good evidence now coming out from several different books and papers about the role of social media for particularly young women. My daughter just asked me recently when she's going to get a cell phone and social media. And I was like, well, much later than your sister, because I didn't know these things. And I think it's really important to protect our kids from this. At a minimum, the data is saying till 16, preferably 18 for social media, because we want that brain executive function to develop. We want the nerves to get their connections solidified before we add all of these additional lenses that they have to try to sort through and say, which ones are true, which ones resonate with me, which ones matter to me, rather than just having this kind of open approach where it's like a fire hose of information hitting them at all times, overwhelming them, saying, this is what you have to do. This is how you have to look. This is how big your thigh gap needs to be.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Yes.
And so I think having those really open conversations and just being like, this is out here and it's not healthy. Are you thinking about this? Is this part of your life? Is this something that you're self-conscious about? And then creating the space that it's open for patients to talk about it. Because a lot of times I feel like they feel like they can't talk about it. Like it's embarrassing to say, oh, I was worried because I felt like I didn't look the way I wanted to look. And just having that compassion there for them and creating the space, I think is really important.
I love that. I love that you do that for them, and that you also model that, and you are also modeling your imperfection with it and how sometimes it doesn't work. I feel like, even today, I had a very, very smart, very healthy weighted colleague tell me, well, I just need to be on, a GLP-1 because I'm not skinny enough. And it's just becoming something that I think is even healthy weight. We see celebrities now that are all on it. And it just blows your mind, because it's just being, in a lot of ways, I think, being just fed to people that they are just not good. They're not skinny enough. And so I think there's an awful lot of noise. And I think it's brilliant that you're giving people space to kind of just be themselves and to not have that judgment.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's an honor and a privilege. And when you hear people's stories, it really drives home how important it is. I can't tell you how many patients cry in my office. And I think it's just that sense of unburdening themselves and being able to be real. And they're like, I wasn't planning to cry when I came here today. I'm like, it's okay. This happens actually a lot because this is a hard space to talk about. It's really hard to talk about these things. I think that weight is often one of the last kind of areas that in America, that's kind of an acceptable form of bias or disparity. It feels okay to judge people, maybe. not speaking for myself personally, but as a society, how we view things. We are much more aware about race, gender, a variety of other things. But weight is one that we do tend to still have some stigma and bias around, and kind of creating a space where that's not the case, and normalizing that, I think, is really important for our patients.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. My mind is blown because our time is drawing to a close. But obviously, the question I want to know is inflammation and Alzheimer's disease.
Oh, yeah.
Things like this. And so I think we're going to need part two for sure.
So much knowledge from you, Dr. Wilson.
This has been everything I'd hoped for and more. We've named this podcast Evening Rounds, and I've asked this question to every single guest that we've had. And I've been really reflective on the answers that they've given. And to when I tell you the term evening rounds, what does it mean to you as a physician?
So I thought about this, and I'd listened to some other podcasts, and I thought some other people gave good answers. And I thought, well, I can't steal their answer. What does it really mean to me? And I'm not sure you're going to like my answer, but I'm just going to be, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and we'll see if you like it or not afterwards. You can tell me. I think for me, evenings rounds really connects with the concept that has been good in my life at times and not so good at sometimes in my life, which is that once you become a doctor, if you really buy in, if you're like, this is my calling, this is a privilege, it's a responsibility I have to the public, you are never not a doctor.
Oh, that's interesting.
There is, or the converse of that, you are always a doctor, right? So there's good and there's bad to that. And I don't think that I fully appreciated that prior to coming to medical school. I saw it as a calling. I saw it as a privilege. I saw it as an opportunity to serve. But I will be honest, there's days when I'm like, I just want to be able to turn the responsibility off. I don't want to have to be the person who has to have the answer or has to have the ethical response in this scenario, because it's a hard conversation to have with a family member who maybe they want the Google answer that's more satisfying, or it's more politically correct, or it's more philosophically expedient for a particular patient to have a particular answer. But we have a responsibility as physicians. And I think when I think about the evening connection, it's the idea that it doesn't turn off. No matter what time of day it is, no matter what time of night it is, I am always, till the end of my days, going to be a doctor who takes this responsibility seriously, and is going to try to represent that to the best of my ability, knowing that I am human and my knowledge is limited.
That's heavy.
I think that's a really, really important point to drive home. And I specifically didn't ask questions about your role in our COVID pandemic, which would be, if there was ever a description of evening rounds in your concept, I'm sure for you, as you were, creating our return to work programs and our testing pathways and so forth, as our health director at the time, that would be it in spades, right? But I think it's really, really important for our physician colleagues and the public to know that physicians, you cannot go into it for a job. It's not something you clock in and clock out on. It's a profession, and it's a calling. And if it's not, you need to do something else because it demands way too much of you.
100%.
Yeah.
I love the answer.
True. Thank you.
Yeah.
A special thanks to the sponsor of Evening Rounds, La Loma, who has provided banking services to the Loma Linda community since 1955. Their support helps us continue bringing you episodes focused on health, story, and mission.